I'm a system administrator, and DevOps, it seems kind of scary. How do I make that transition? You know, I thought about this for a long time, and I get asked this question a lot because I've been really lucky to get really immersed in that DevOps movement. And what DevOps really says, and it's more than just tools, and while Azure DevOps is an incredible product for you to use to do continuous integration and continuous delivery, DevOps itself is more than just that. DevOps is about continuous education, communication, and really growing so that your career continues to grow with you. So don't think of it as scary. Think of it as more than just pipelines, more than just new tools, more than just configuration management. DevOps is a way to help your entire business work smarter, help your team do a lot easier things when it comes to working together, and ultimately that collaboration will create a really, really great environment for you as that system administrator to grow into doing work in the DevOps world.
Hey, it's your buddy Jay again. I'm back. It's AzureFunBytes, and yeah, we're going to talk a little bit more DevOps today. We're going to talk about a bunch of things, and so I am always so happy to bring this show to you every week, which is giving me some sad news. No show next week. I'm moving. I have to move into a new apartment, and also I'm getting ready to go to Microsoft Ignite. We're going to talk about Microsoft Ignite. And when I say go, I mean get onto my chair here in my new apartment in Brooklyn, and eventually talking to all of you, learning about what's going on online, and then teaching you. So I've got a talk there. We'll talk more about it with my guest today. And speaking of my guest, one of my guests today, I've been on here before, and he's helped me in the past think about DevOps and how it is not just one singular thought process, but it's encompassed by a lot of different things. And one of those things are ultimately going to be how you spend, how you're going to utilize all these services that you put into place. So that's going to be important. He's going to also show us some other tips and tricks that he's got, because Steve's always up to some really good stuff. That's Steven Murawski. He's back here today. I'm really, really lucky. But one of the things, like I said, he's going to talk to us about today is cost management. So before he stops in, we got another thing to watch. Let's watch it.
Doesn't everything cost more in the cloud? The answer's kind of complex. It's yes and no. So in the cloud, we have a number of great capabilities that we don't necessarily have on premise. So it's not a one-to-one relationship. But one of the things that we do see in the cloud is we do see a more direct tie from our expense to the value that's being delivered. Can it cost more? Sure. If I run the same size virtual machine inside of Azure as I do in my on-premise data center, where I've got hardware that I've expensed as part of a capital expense and is spread across a number of different projects? Yeah, potentially. But if I actually can take a look at services that auto-scale, if I can take a look at the actual resource utilization or the effectiveness of the service for the value, I can make money-saving choices. And I can also make sure that we're focusing on the real thing here. It's not the cost savings, it's the value delivery. It's the value for the dollar that we're getting. And the cloud helps make that a much easier determination.
And dollar for dollar, I'm getting all my value with you being here today, Steve. Thanks for joining.
Oh, thanks for making me watch myself. That's always painful.
Hey,
it's great to be here, Jay.
I mean, I remember when we recorded those. It seems like a lifetime ago that we were all in, I think it was Bellevue, Washington for a few days. And we all wanted to take a few days to get to know each other a little bit more, to meet, have conversations about work, and and each other. And then we got to get together, record a bunch of those videos, and I liked them. They were fun to do. I like hamming it up on the camera.
Yeah, no, they're fun to do. I just have a hard time watching myself, but it really cues up. I think it cues up the discussion, or some of the stuff we want to talk about and show today, because it's an aspect of DevOps that I don't think we spend enough time on as a community in general. And it's an area where DevOps and cloud really overlap. And so even if you're not doing DevOpsy things, it's a conversation that I think you can get value out of too.
Gotcha. One of the things I've learned from being in this community for quite a while, as you have, is that we value ways to get the most out of what you're using, whether it's CPU memory or your cloud provider. If you can manage to get the most out of what you have, I think you're really getting it right. And that's the thing that I've learned in working in production environments where there's a lot of money in play. There's a lot of systems. Ultimately, someone is going to look at your costs and your spend, and they're going to ask you, why does this cost so much? And how do we make it cost less?
Well, and think about a traditional data center environment, right? I've got racks and racks of servers, and I've got workloads running on them. And now I have this little one-off project come up. And it's not enough to go requisition some new hardware, or it's not enough to go and carve out some new VMs or something. And so maybe I just squeak it onto something that's already running things that may be a little underutilized. Mm-hmm. And so from my perspective, that thing costs, there's no additional outlay for hardware and expenses and utilities and things like that. But there is, right? And there's a percentage now of that hardware that's being dedicated back to this service. And so I'm not seeing the true cost of it. And I won't see the true cost until something major happens in our environment and we're changing things.
Yeah,
right?
that's kind of, I mean, isn't that like what we notice in almost any like computing environment? Is like you start to see changes when you make changes, and then you determine if those changes provide value or if they complicate things, and that can come in cost saving measures as well, because you can buy a bunch of reservations and end up making the wrong decisions and get stuck with the money. So I think learning from what we do with just basic ops also can reflect what we're doing with our cost optimization.
Yeah, and I think we have we can tend to have a bit of cost saving brain damage from being in operations, because in operations we traditionally there are two things that we could control, and that was cost and on-time delivery of projects, right? Those are kind of our our major our major levers that we could pull. And there's things like outages and stuff like that all plays into it. But when we look at there's always pressure to drive costs down, because we weren't able to relate the costs were like these big lump sums. Like, I have all this cost for hardware, and I have all this cost for data, and I have all this cost for storage, and I have all this cost for license fees and things like that. And we didn't relate them in proportion to the software that was running and the services that were running on those things and the utility that we're getting for that. It's more of a, well, if you want email and phone and you want to be able to track your customer sales, we need to spend this lump. And so we couldn't. It was hard to make utility judgments about those things. When we start shifting into the cloud, we start changing that discussion, because now we can more tightly relate the spend to the utility. And in many cases, it may not be the right thing to cut cost for certain workloads. We may be better off spending more there, because if I spend more there, maybe I can do more transactions per second, which means we can make more money, which means, or we can close deals faster, or
It's funny you say that, because I worked for a database company, and a lot of times companies would look at the database and say, well, why are we spending so much on the compute? They were like, I understand the storage, but I don't always understand the compute. And then when their analytics process takes 2 days because they went cheap on it, and they bought reservations on some cheap compute on some database services, you start to recognize, maybe I robbed Peter to pay Paul kind of thing, and it didn't work out. And then you see things like your database transactions taking longer and longer, and your application being slower, and then your customers that may be doing something, or your users ending up on your site less and less because you're reducing confidence in it.
Yep, and very often we have metrics that are capturing, what the load is, what the time to retrieve a query is, how long it takes to present something to the user. We've gotten good at tracking that kind of stuff, and we even do experimentation. And hey, if I make this change to the page, how does that affect things? But one dimension that we're not putting in there very often, it's rare that I've seen this, but the impact on cost, right? What happens to our throughput? What happens to all of those measures that we care about if I bump the SKU up of the app service that we're running on, or if I bump it down, or if I scale it in or scale it out? How does that impact the cost per those values we care about? And I think we can become a lot more effective and efficient with how we use the cloud and how we use the resources that we have and where we place the emphasis for those dollars if we start adding those metrics in. And if you want, I'd be happy to show you some of the places we can get it, and some of the places we can get some of that information, and some of the places that we can, and some of the things that we can explore there.
Sure. So I'll let you kind of orient your screen. You ready?
I am. All right. So are we, is it shared?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Looking good, man. Looking good.
All right. So I'm actually in one of our internal subscriptions here. And so I manage our team's subscriptions.
You sure do, man. You sure do.
So part of that is keeping an eye on the cost across these things. And so I've started to get pretty comfortable with the tooling. And inside Azure, we break up charges based on subscription, based on you can break it up on a number of different avenues. And the default way we start looking at this is in the subscription page, there's a cost analysis area. And it'll tell me how much I'm spending. I can pick different time periods. I can, so I can go like the last 3 months or something like that. I can look at the last fiscal year, all sorts of fun stuff there. But I can also look at different views of this, and I can look at it by resource group. I like resource group because that's, that to me is like a logical unit of what I'm going to deploy. And so, but I can also look at it based on region, or I can look at it based on service name, all the way down to what individual resources cost me. I can set budgets and do all sorts of fun stuff right here in the UI. But I personally like pulling a lot of this data out so that I can do other stuff with it. You can hook Power BI right up to Azure Cost Management and create some fun graphs and things. But I like pulling it out, and there's an API to pull out that data. And I'm going to show you how I play with that in just a sec. But one thing before we leave this is maybe you have other financial management tooling that you work with regularly, and you want to pull the Azure costs into that. You can actually you can either work with the API, or we can actually schedule an export of our billing data that will get dropped in a CSV file into Azure into blob storage for you on a regular basis, which could be daily, weekly, depending on whatever you want your cadence there to be. And this is wanted to take a moment here. Let's see if we can't make this go a little faster.
Sure.
The joy of trying to live demo while streaming.
Hey, I do it every week. It's not easy. So I
well,
absolutely.
I think we can come back to this when this page eventually loads. I'm going to show you how
sure.
you play with the API.
Okay.
So there is a nice, well-defined cost management API, and maybe I should have used a different browser than what I'm streaming from, but that's probably my streaming noobness coming through.
Hey, you know what? We are
there
in
is an API
brand new world.
that-
Brand new world, man.
I've been working with in PowerShell, and hopefully by the time the end of this week hits, I'll have this published on GitHub, and so Jay can add to the notes what the GitHub repo is. But I've wrapped in PowerShell a couple of commands for working with the REST APIs, and there's one of the APIs that we have is the query API, and by default, we can get back some basic information. Now I'm going to go against that same subscription that we were just looking at, and I'm going to, let's see here.
Is there
press the right button? We'll run this invoke AZCN query, and I'll get back my billing date, my billing month to date, and that's just one lump sum view, which may be helpful to you, but you may want a little bit more detail. And there's different ways we can break down this data, and the API we basically ask the API for it in different ways. And one way I can say I want daily data. I don't just want this billing month. I want it broken out by day. So we can say, give me it every day, and we'll get back a result for every day in the period that we asked for. Again, by default, it's looking billing month to date, but we can specify things like the last week. We can specify the last year, the last 30 days. There's a number of different timeframes that we can ask for, as well as custom timeframes. So,
here, Steve, here's
I can give it a start date and an end date. So, like, we could just do like the last week if we wanted, or I could say custom and give it a start date and an end date and get back those random things.
Hey,
we
Steve,
have another way that we can
can you hear
make this data fun to play with, and we can ask for different dimensions. Now, by dimensions, these are different ways that the API will return our data and slice it up for us. And so those are things when we were looking in the UI, we saw things where we could break it out by resource group name or by resource type or by region, right? Resource location. So these are the different options that we can use to get different views into that billing data. And so that's where, we can look at, if I'm looking at by resource ID, I can start to tie that more closely back to my monitoring data. And now I can start to say, hey, if I'm getting back over the last day, I've spent X, yesterday I spent Y, and then now I've got my performance metrics here. I can start to make evaluations. Am I getting the most from my resource? Or, hey, was that scaling effort worth it, or was scaling back worth it? Or maybe we need to put a bigger VM SKU underneath this workload, right? Because maybe things are coming back a little slow, and we really need to spend more. Or, hey, no, this job can run longer. I don't care. As long as it's done within 48 hours, it's fine. As long as it's done within 24 hours, it's fine. So we can start making and having a real conversation around the utility that we're getting for each of the individual things. So let's use one of these. Let's use one of these dimensions and see what the data comes back. So just to refresh, when we just got back the kind of lump sum on billing date to month, we get a pre-tax cost, we get the subscription ID, what the granularity was, the usage date. So now we're going to add a dimension here of the resource name, or resource group name, and then I'm going to pass that into that query, I'm just for space, because there's a lot of resource groups. I've narrowed our time window to 2 days, the second and the third. And so we can start to see as the results come back that it's tagging the resource group name and it's giving me the cost per resource group name. And so if I'd go and add all these things up, it would give me the effective total cost for those days.
Mm-hmm.
But I can start to see where, and if I start dumping this into Power BI or I dump it into a data store like Azure Data Explorer, I can graph these things out over time, or I can run some analysis over these things and start to see and maybe look for some anomalies, or I can look for things that have fallen out of scope and kind of get a better experience. No, Jay, I lost you.
You can't hear me now?
Nope, now I can hear you.
Oh, cool. Yeah,
I just
sorry.
came back. Yeah.
Oh, weird. Yeah, I was wondering what happened. I'm going through some weird computer stuff today because I'm in the middle of moving, so I'm not even using my regular setup. So I wanted to just say I found this document. I want to know if you think it's useful. Use Azure Billing APIs to programmatically get insight into your Azure usage. Would that be a great document for me to share with our guests today, or our viewers today?
Actually, here I will. I've got.
Because I'm going to send that one first.
So there's the cost management APIs and there's the billing APIs.
Mm-hmm.
And I would recommend the cost management APIs. The billing API stuff tends to be more, I believe, is tied more into the enterprise only.
Gotcha. All right. I think I found the documentation for it, and I'm going to post it as well in the chat.
Okay, I think I've got an AKA link here as well.
Okay, great. Yeah, if you want to put it in the in our back channel, I'll go ahead and share it with our viewers. And our viewers, as this show continues, we're getting some great information from Steve. So please go ahead and let us know if you got any questions about all this really awesome information, because I'm feeling pretty lucky that y'all are getting to learn this, because these are things that I don't even have a real grasp around. So you're learning while I'm learning. And so here's a link for some of the documentation for all this for Azure.
Yeah, I'm sorry, my browser is not responding here.
Yeah, no problem. This is... if you want to go ahead and
I'll drop it to you. Yeah, I can drop it to you.
I went ahead. Yeah, so Steve's going to figure out what's going on. Hey, when you do it and you do it live, these things happen. Now, things are happening and they're happening live. And I think that really gives me a great opportunity to tell you about a big, huge, awesome live event that is coming up really soon. So coming up in the next 2 weeks, we're going to have Microsoft Ignite. Microsoft Ignite is an incredible opportunity for you to learn a ton about Azure, about development, about all these incredible services that you are going to learn about at Ignite. And so this year at Ignite, and I've been able to do Ignite for the last few years. I've done the Ignite tour. It's really, really fun. There's so much to learn. Well, this year I'm doing, I think, what is my favorite talk I've been able to write yet. It's called the DevOps. The interns are DevOps in it for themselves, and it's going to be in an area called the Learning Zone. And the Learning Zone is going to be a place for you to get a ton of information about how to use different portions of Azure. And so I'm going to show you a video really quickly about what exactly the Learning Zone is going to be. And my buddy Abel is going to help me out. So let's take a look. So yeah, Microsoft Learn is going to have a lot of great workshops for you in the learning zone to get started. And one of the things that I'm going to be doing this year is a talk on the interns are DevOps in it for themselves. And the big focus is going to be around GitHub Actions and integrating that with what is the Azure Static Web Apps application, or I should say Azure Static Web Apps service. Azure Static Web App service is really, really an incredibly easy way to integrate a full kind of like fully hosted method of using GitHub Actions to have a static website hosted without having to do a whole lot of stuff. The fact that GitHub Actions is kind of at the core of it, to me, is super awesome. We looked at it a little last week when I was working with Donovan. We kind of did it around we talked about a Node.js app, and he did it with using the static web app within standard web app services. And that's kind of different from web apps, static web apps. So we can take a quick look at what static web apps are. I talked a little bit about DevOps as what we were going to look at today. I'm not really sure what happened to Steve. I guess we'll figure it out. Hopefully we get him back, but these are the way things sometimes in technology work. Sometimes things work out, sometimes they don't. And especially when you do it live, it's very, very always hard to get it right the very first time. And so what I'm going to try to do is figure out what we're going to do next. So thanks a lot, as always, for watching. And I know it's a little tough today. I'm doing my best here. We'll get through it, me and you. So why don't I show you a little bit about this whole static web apps thing for a few minutes. And what we'll do is we'll take a look at something really cool. Like I said, it's going to be a preview for what we're going to be looking at Ignite. I think it's really neat. I hope you like what I'm going to show you. So give me 1 sec. I know, this is always the hard part of doing it and doing it live. All right, here we go. Let me go ahead and share you a little bit of what I wanted to show you. And like I said, I do apologize that it's a little bit disheveled this week. Not really sure what happened, but we'll make sure it's better next time. So one of the things I'm going to show you today is Azure Static Web Apps. It's a really easy to use all-in-one service for static application building. You get a single unified workflow with GitHub Actions. This is really, really useful because, you are able to have a full CI/CD pipeline built for you out of the box. You don't have to write any of the YAML. We'll take a look at what that looks like in just a sec. You get serverless APIs powered by Azure Functions, another really, really useful tool. You will not have to worry about writing boilerplate code for something like, let's say, a backend process. Maybe you want to connect a database to a simple form that you have on your website. You may not want to have to write a whole bunch of boilerplate code to connect the two. What you can do is use a serverless API powered by Azure Functions and integrate it directly into your Azure Static Web App. You can also integrate authentication with flexible roles and access to ensure that only people that modify what you have can. And so you're able to take your code, you're able to push it to GitHub, You can use a CI/CD process that's built into this whole static web apps process. So every time you push something to GitHub to master, you'll kick off a continuous integration and continuous deployment process. While you do that, if you would like to, you can use APIs and you can route those requests from your app to those APIs. You can use custom SSL, and I should say you can use SSL and custom domain names. Every single one of these static web apps, out of the box, you get an SSL cert and a fully qualified domain. It's just a custom one for you to use. You can then add a specific, well, I should say a randomized domain name. We'll show you in a minute. You get authentication. Obviously, you need to be able to let only certain people in if you want to. You can have that out of the box using the portal or an API call to configure it. You can set security roles for who modifies what. And of course, the big portion of all this having global scale, the big thing we've always talked on this show about Azure is that you have a foundation of global scale, giving you the ability to build these huge, reliable applications. But in this case, you can also build small, tiny applications. And that all comes together to build these static web apps. And you get this fully capable application right out of the box. And what I'm going to show you today is how to utilize that service, what I think is smart. And Steve, you're back with me. Hi. You want me? I'm going to do a quick demo for them, just to kind of move it along, and I hope you enjoy it. I did it earlier today, and everyone seemed to get a lot out of it watching it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and create a new Azure static web app. And so I'll just go into here, and so this is kind of a preview of what I'm going to be doing at Ignite this year. Not specifically this, but we're going to use something pretty close. We're going to create a static web app. And first I'm going to create a resource group. And you know what I like to refer to resource groups as, Steve? Egg cartons. I love calling them egg cartons. Want to know why? Because you can put things in egg cartons. You can take them out and put them in other egg cartons. And after you're done, if there's a bad egg, you can throw it away. If all the eggs are bad, throw the whole goddamn carton away and get yourself a new one. That's why I like calling it an egg carton. Excuse my language today. I'm from New York City. Anyhow, I'm going to create it, and we're going to call it a static site. That's just a naming convention for a resource group. Then we're going to create a static web app. Now, here's the big thing. Have you messed around with this yet, Steve?
No, actually, I have not. It's on the backlog of things I want to, but I'm looking to learn.
So it's really, really new. And that's one of the reasons why we're going to add a static web app name. And I'm just going to static J123. This isn't going to be the host name. I know if you're going to do something like this, you're going to assume name, it's going to be the host name, but it's not. We're in preview. And so a lot of that early customization, it's still pretty new. So you're just going to put in some sort of identifier, like a host name. It's not what's the host on the server. When you think about a Linux machine or even a Windows server, the host name is just an identifier. And that's what this is. And so now we're going to pick a region. It's only in a few because we're in a preview. And what I'll do here is I'll just pick East US 2. I'll sign in with GitHub. And what I can do is go ahead and continue and authorize, and it's going to go ahead and connect my account from Azure over to this repo. And so what I'm going to do now is select my account. And the fact that this is all integrated right into Azure makes it super, super simple. So we'll go into repository, and I'm going to use one I'm building for Ignite. It's really ready to go. And it's TWT intern, and it's just a static website. That's it. Just HTML. It's right over here. Let me go ahead and bring it up. So I'm going to bring it here in VS Code to show everybody how simple. It's just Hugo. Where are we? Here, TWT interns, or is it intern? Let me see. Intern, wrong repo. Sorry. Let's go to the right one. And that's also another real fun thing that we can do. We can do it, a lot of this work, if we want to, right here in VS Code. I know I'm flailing. I got to just find what I will need. Sorry, everybody. Sometimes when you do it live, you flail. Okay, so let's just go ahead and clone the repository. So I'm going to go to GitHub. Sometimes it's just easier to go. And one of the things I'm going to show you that's eventually going to be created in this repository, we're going to see it's just some basic code, nothing really special. Within this directory called content, we have some markdown files, all right? In these markdown files, we just have basic markdown, nothing special. And what's actually going to happen is if I go ahead and I clone this repo, so let's just go right here, git clone. Oop, we already have it. I don't even need to do it. Git pull. Sometimes it all works out for you, you know? So let's open this up here in VS Code. Great. And if you want to know how I had that different color on my VS Code theme, it's called Peacock. It's a way of changing so you can have different colors for different tabs or different ones. Sometimes it's useful you have a different, or I should say a couple of different projects open in VS Code. So let's go over this really quickly. I don't want to take it up too much. If we go here into content, we look here, we've got our different pieces of markdown. If I go here and I bring up a terminal, you can see if I just run Hugo, it just builds static sites. That's it. It just takes the markdown. And then if you go here into the public directory, it just generates it. It's really simple. We go into something like the about section. There's all the code. So we don't really need to do anything really fancy to get this online. We just go back here to this create static web app and we pick the branch. And so after we build the branch, we need to set up our CI/CD process, you know, how we start building it and then deploying it to Azure. And so what I'll do is I'll go to these build presets and we'll see that some of these static site generators that exist already are right here built into Azure. Also for certain frameworks. So if you've got just an Angular web app or something in Vue, you can do that. Gatsby, Hugo, or VuePress. But in this case, I'm going to use Hugo. So this is where it gets super easy, Steve. Mm-hmm. The application is just like any other thing. It's slash. It's where the code is going to start from. It's where everything exists. API location is if I want to integrate, say, an Azure function. So I would create an Azure function. I would grab the HTTPS and I would pop it in here.
Okay.
I didn't create an Azure function for this particular thing, so I'm just going to delete it. I don't need it. And then the app artifact location is where our static site generator, when I typed Hugo, if I hadn't typed Hugo yet, this directory public would be empty. The first time you run Hugo and every time you make a change, it will go ahead and modify what is in these static pages from whatever changes. So if I go here to about and I type something different, render the page, commit, it's ready to go. It should be in the static portion. So all I need to do here, see how there we have some examples. I'm just going to type public. And so if I want to tag it with any environment variables or something like that, I can put that there, but we don't need to. So we'll go to review and create, and then Azure Resource Manager, like every other thing we build in Azure, takes a look, sees what's going on, and then figures out what we actually are going to build, and then says, yeah, you're allowed to. So we'll click create. So this process is super fast, and it's because the actual hosting resource is not a tremendous amount of compute. And so you can see like the deployment of the resource happens very fast. So we'll go to the resource, and actually the time that's taken here is actually in the build and deploy, and we'll look at that in a sec. So have you messed around much with GitHub Actions?
A little bit, yeah.
So this whole process that we just did is completely based on GitHub Actions.
Oh, nice.
Everything that we just did, it's going to create a GitHub Actions run for us. And we didn't have to create any YAML. We didn't have to do anything. All we had to do is go and actually do our next last within the portal. What this whole thing did was it gives us some information. So one, it gives us a URL, a static URL, and it's a demo ready to go. Hey, well, the reason why our website isn't online yet is because it's still going through the CI/CD process. So we can go ahead and look at the deployment history and click GitHub Action Runs. And what we're going to see is every time something is committed to this repository now, it's going to start a new CI/CD build. So if I go here, we can look. A build and deploy job was created. And how did that happen? If we go back here, we'll see that there's a reference to this workflow file right here. Let's click on it. When we completed our action between GitHub and Azure, we created a trust. And what it really does, and we'll bring it up first, is here in settings, is it creates secrets that allows a deploy process to be done between the two. I've got some old ones there I need to clean up. I could create an Azure function to do that, I'm sure. But what you can see is that Azure dumped this particular file, which is basically like you and I have talked, I think, since the first time I ever met you. It's basically almost like infrastructure as code, but not just infrastructure as code, but deployment process in there as well, like ARM. That's what you're trying to do. Like ARM allows you to integrate, application installations along with your infrastructure. This workflow file is basically saying what that's going to look like using GitHub Actions as the real engine behind it. So every time a pull request is open and is closed in the master branch of our app here, GitHub is going to look for that, and it's going to start, based on a trigger, a build and deploy job. And then what it's going to do, it's going to check out the application. It's going to then use the secret to be able to push the application. So it's basically setting some variables right here on what's going to happen when we do our deploy. And after we close the job and we fill, we push it to Azure. And so what happens is there's a trust here also shown, the secret that says you can push the artifact that's created from our CI/CD build. So what happens here, GitHub Actions essentially reads that little map, the actions, the workflow, what we want to do, that's written in YAML. And it tells you we're going to use a build container. We're going to check out that Git repository. We're going to build the code inside. And that we stated it was a Hugo blog. And so if I'll make it bigger here, you'll see that it builds based on the Hugo version and renders our pages. So it's doing a build as well. That's not just, we're just copying and dumping the file. It's actually making sure, and if we wanted to, we could go in here and add tests, standard unit tests, and GitHub Actions would pass those unit tests so that we would make sure that if we add things that they're tested and they work. So if we're expecting certain strings and certain pages, if a function is supposed to do a thing based on, we want to make sure we test for that. In this case, this is a demo. So once this is all done and it builds everything, it creates a zip file. And that zip file eventually gets pushed up to Azure. The process checks out, it destroys the container and completes the job. What happens then? We go back now to our URL, and my website's up. So this is the website I'm going to be using for Ignite this year. But yeah, this is my static site that we just built, couple minutes.
Yeah, nice.
And And let's just take a look back at this right over here. We can look how we can make some changes in the configuration. We can add different environments. So we can have a production environment. We can have a staging environment. We can do different things based on that. We can add our custom domains. So I can turn that into the Tailwind Traders interns website eventually. I can add those Azure functions to the production environment, or if I have a different environment and I want to have, say, this is a demo function that goes to a demo database, we can create that. That's why we create these environments. Here's my production environment. If I wanted a staging, I could create that. You know how we have those like deploy slots in apps? This is kind of like that. Not completely, but it's getting you close to something like that. Role management for adding IAM into the situation. Locks, that's a standard Azure thing. We'll talk about locks and different policies in the future. But that's doing all this. And you know what I'm going to do real quick, Steve, is let's show what happens when I go to, say, let's go to this about, and let's just double click. Let's just add this lorem again, okay? Then what I'm going to do is save this. I'm going to now type Hugo. It's going to rebuild the page that change I just made. Then what I'm going to do is do a Git Add. I use command line Git. If you want to use Git based in here, feel free. Git commit. I'm just going to commit to master. Normally you should create a new branch. This is a demo. Sorry, everybody. Git commit -m small lorem. Now we'll just push. Uh-oh. I got some. Oh, you know why? This is because of the workflow file. I had to git pull before I made my change. It happens. So git push. Okay, so now my change went up. Let's go back to our repository. Let's go to actions. There's my change. It's already starting to go through. Literally from that quickly is now we have our new CI/CD process. It's going to go. It's going to make sure, like we did last time, instantaneous right to. And what I could do is I don't have to do it. I could create a secondary one of these. And if I don't want to do directly from the master branch, if I want to do another branch, like let's say I have another version I want to test before I say I point my host name to it. It's a great way to kind of work through this. So I love this service and how it integrates with this really, what I think is the CI/CD service of now. Like as much as I think Azure DevOps is an incredibly useful product for what I would say almost like an enterprise full end-to-end DevOps. No matter what you want, you can throw it in. I do love how easy that GitHub Actions integration to Azure is. I mean, same with Azure DevOps, it's there, but I do so much with GitHub already. Mm-hmm. The fact that like it all stays within my GitHub, including that like workflow file. And hey, speaking of how easy, that's already done. Like we just chatted for a few seconds, but our job's done. Let's go back. What did I do? The about section.
Yep.
Let's go. And there's lorem. There's the change I just made, and that fast. So I love the fact that it gives people like that kind of advantage of DevOps without having to really, put that helmet on. If they want to do small, like introductions to little things. So if you've got that app that's still on a VM, that's something like this, and you're asking yourself, why do I have this on a VM? This is a great opportunity to not only just stop FTPing that thing up or rsyncing your changes, but to put it in a SaaS or software, or I should say a PaaS, a platform as a service. And on top of using that PaaS, making sure that you have it integrated into a CI/CD process so that the people you work with moving forward are set up for success.
Very cool. Yeah, So I've built similar processes using like AppVeyor and Azure DevOps and things for blogs before, using Jekyll or Hugo. So yeah, this is nice. That's a nice experience.
I really got to agree. It's that experience of how smooth it all kind of runs together. The fact that like if you've got tests set up, I think already for your, like, obviously I just did it on the fly, but if you're using branches within GitHub, you're merging things, you're making changes, you've got a kind of a workflow within your organization to get these things done. I think something like this just continues to advance like DevOps methodologies within your organization. So even if you're like trying to dip your toe in and you're talking to people and say, well, we're understanding the culture, but the tooling is still kind of foreign to us. This is a great way to kind of start working with that tooling, because it's not just working with just Azure.
Yeah.
It's making Git a primary, like it is the first party way of changing things. GitHub is your source of truth. And I think like you and I have talked a little bit about Chef in the past. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the things that I really loved about Chef and the way that Chef Server specifically was configured was it was a source of truth. You put that in a Git repo, it was replicated onto your Chef server, and it was a source of truth of what your entire environment was supposed to look like.
Well, yeah, so much of that ecosystem started with that, right? Like if I'm working on a cookbook, or I have a monorepo with a bunch of cookbooks, basically my policy for managing my machines, I'm starting with that in Git. Maybe I'm gonna include some different tests of different types, and I want to have that run locally, but I also want to run it against what's in my upstream repository, the main repository that we're calling our source of truth. And and if you're looking for a nice introductory way, a nice easy way to get into this, I've often suggested that putting a little automation like this around a blog is a great way to kind of get comfortable with the ideas and the concepts, and working with Git, having some making a change to something in source control and having that drive changes to the environment. It's a wonderful way to get started. So because it's low impact, and it's low impact in terms of like, I'm not all of a sudden switching the main thing that drives my company's business over to tools that I don't understand, to something that's really reachable, attainable, and accessible, but helping build the right patterns.
Yeah, and what I really think is that DevOps is ultimately about making incremental changes. It's not about a revolution.
Yep.
A revolution comes once you've implemented everything and people understand. It begins by saying, let's introduce things a step at a time, because we're doing everything quicker, easier, not easier, but quicker, leaner. We're doing it in less parts. We're doing it in ways that we can optimize our cycles as humans to optimize the work that eventually goes into our environments or applications.
Yeah, the revolution happens when you aren't looking, and you look back days, weeks, months, years later after small improvement after small improvement after we tried something but it didn't work, so we threw it away and we tried something else, and all of a sudden you look back and months or years have passed, but the way you work is radically different from where you started. But it doesn't feel like that, because we took those manageable changes and we just added in one thing or took away a thing. Taking away is as important, if not more important, than adding in, because if I can add in a little bit of automation, I can take away a bunch of manual work. Right? And finding ways to make it a little bit more consistent, a little bit more tested, a little bit more thorough, day by day, right? And it's not all of a sudden, it's not this insurmountable change that we're facing It's just one small thing.
Yeah, and I guess once we take day by day, we learn these things, we add them into our environments, and we become more comfortable. We find ways that this DevOps thing isn't that big of a deal. It's not that hard. It's really about just taking inventory of who you are all as a group, and then trying to make everyone the best possible themselves from the who you have. Because DevOps is ultimately about people. It's about people working together to get the most out of technology. And I think we learned a bunch about that today, about how, we as people, we can do these little things to save money, because ultimately we need to save money so that we can get the most out of what we have. And whether we're just individuals or little CPUs, we want to get the most out of them, or they're big CPUs, we want to make sure that they're not underutilized and we're getting the most out of everything.
You bet.
Hey, so Steve, I think we're just about ready to wrap up. I want to thank you for being a part of this. I know I asked you on a quick, and only because, I got a lot going on. Everybody, The next time you see me, it will be in a different room. But thank you so much.
Oh, no worries. And I think I hit some technical difficulties where I was talking to a browser that was just looking back at me. But no, I really appreciate the chance to come on and share a little bit. And I think we got some, at least some good talk about cost management and where that, and hopefully provoke some ideas. And then I got to learn something, which is awesome. So I appreciate that very much, Jay.
And thank you, Jack Porkins. Appreciate you chiming in. The other thing I want to make sure, is there anything you want to make sure you share with us as far as anything that you work on week to week? I know you do that Azure DevOps newsletter. Is there any other stuff you want to make sure you share with everybody?
Yeah, so every week I do a community roundup of blog posts that are kind of making the rounds in the Azure DevOps community, and it can be anything Azure DevOpsy related. But also I've got a webinar coming up on dev test environments. It's next week on the 17th. Talk about how in relation to cost management, how you can save some money for your dev test environments, and then also some cool automation you can do, and then ways that we can use the cloud to improve the local developer experience. So yeah.
I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to post the September 4th edition of the top stories.
Cool.
That's going to be right there. This is the URL it's a short link that'll get you right to the last edition of it. And if you want to go ahead and keep up with them, I know there's ways you can do that. But anyway, Steve, thank you so much for being a part this week. I will talk to you, of course, so much because we're on the same team. Yep. Hey, you, your family, hope everybody's doing great. And I will see you very soon.
Take care.
Hey, everybody, that is running down to the end. Let's talk for a second. Just me and you. So this has been really fun. I'm at the end of what I'm going to consider my first season. This is going to be end of season 1. And the reason I'm calling this end of season 1 is I got to take a break. I won't be able to do next week. And I really have enjoyed doing this. A lot of people have every week watched. I get lots of comments. If you're in the chat right now, just send me something because I want to give you some props too. You've all been so much fun. I know there's Phil and some other people who have been watching every week that are really supportive. I've had a bunch of coworkers like Steve and Abel, Donovan, just so many people, Pumala, all the way at the beginning, my first guest. This has been really fun. And so my hope is in kind of what I'm going to call season 2, which will probably start maybe about 2 weeks, maybe 2 or 3 weeks after Ignite. So what we're going to do is on September 20, I believe it's 22nd through the 24th, we're going to have Microsoft Ignite. You can start registering now. I want to make sure I build you some really cool stuff. I want to make sure that things are fun. Hey, thank you so much. Appreciate that. It's really cool to know that. When I come back for next season, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to dive into some new things. So we're going to talk about stuff like Azure policy, really much deeper things. We talked a lot about building blocks, things that make up Azure, but I think it's time to talk about how to make Azure work for you. So we'll talk about things like we saw locks. We'll talk a little bit more about IAM. And maybe we'll do some different type of authentication. Maybe we'll talk to someone who does security. I think it's time to go into the next few things. And you've all helped me get here. I don't do this every week without you. Thank you so much for being part of it, especially people who watch the replays on YouTube, who read on Dev2, all that stuff. Thank you so much. It's been great. I will catch you all in a couple weeks, probably. I may do a replay show here and there. I hope you enjoy them. But that's really it. I'm going to bring Meadow over. Hey, Meadow. Come here, baby girl. Come here. Me and you. Let's take a moment. Just move my chair over so you can say hi to my friend Meadow.